Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to open the third and last session for today, after all the changes that were made. This session is entitled Families and Networks. I'm Ephraim Shoham from the Center for the Study of Conversion in the Jewish History Department here at BGU. And I would like to introduce our absent yet very well-known first speaker. I will be reading his lecture. It's our very own Moshe Yagur, who led us all yesterday in a fabulous tour, both of Beersheba, Ashkelon, and Yavne, and introduced us to the beauties and the wonders of this land. Moshe Yagur was a PhD candidate at the Department of Jewish History at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He studies the social history of Jewish communities in the medieval Islamic Mediterranean, and specifically in Egypt and the Levant. His dissertation is titled Religious Identity and Communal Boundaries in Geniza Society, the 10th to the 13th centuries, Proselytes, Apostates, and Slaves, and it's due summer 2017, so stay tuned. He is a doctoral fellow at the Center for the Study of Conversion and Interreligious Encounters since the summer of 2014. His presentation is titled, Are you with the Jews, your father's people, or with your mother and the Gentiles? In early 1185, the Muslim scholar Muhammad ibn Ahmed ibn Jubayr was waiting in western Sicily for the sea to open and for a ship to take him back home to Valencia after his Hajj to Mecca. He took the time to describe the fortunes of the Muslims living in Sicily as a religious minority under Norman rule. One of his descriptions relates to family relations, and here's a quote. Muslims of this island suffer, amongst other tribulations, one that is very sore. Should a man show anger to his son or his wife, or a woman to her daughter, the one who is the object of displeasure may perversely throw himself into a church and there be baptized and turn Christian. Then there will be for the father no way of approaching his son, or the mother her daughter. Conceive now the state of one so afflicted in his family, or even in his son. The dread of their falling to this temptation would alone shorten his life. The Muslims of Sicily, therefore, are most watchful of the management of their family and their children in case this should happen. Ibn Jubayr's description is a fine example of how conversion, or the possibility of conversion, affected family relations within the minority community. Bill Jordan has used this quote and similar cases to strengthen his claim that we should pay more attention to family tensions and adolescent aspirations of autonomy as an important factor in conversion, and that this way we can learn, we can see actual human stories behind conversion instead of the undifferentiated mass of traders. And I will say that I personally took this quote by Bill Jordan as well and used it in my research, so I hold by it as well. In my talk today, in Moshe's talk today, I wish to take a look at the other side of Ibn Jubayr, of what Ibn Jubayr has described. That is, instead of looking at how conversion or the possibility of conversion affected family relations, I will examine how family relations affected conversion, or the possibility of conversion. I will focus, as Jordan has suggested, on young adolescents and on very specific circumstances. The possible reconversion of children of Jewish apostates back to Judaism. I believe that this unique prism offers us a glimpse to several fascinating issues: ties between apostates in the community, second-generation effects of conversion, attitudes towards reconversion, and the agency of the converts and their family members. As is well known, the legal status of an apostate in Jewish literature is ambivalent at best. Classical rabbinic writing do not contain a thorough discussion of this subject. In the early Muslim period, an argument was advanced by some, I underline some, of the Gaonim, that the clear line should be drawn between Jews and apostates. They should not inherit from each other, should not perform the yibum, etc. However, this attitude did not prevail, and it seems that most Gaonim believed that an apostate is still a Jew in the legal aspect, definitely in matters of personal status, marriage and divorce, and as we heard from Louis Simonson in last year's conference. The accumulative evidence from the legal literature, mainly Respondent, and from the Cairo Geniza documents suggest that in the 10th to 13th centuries, Jewish apostates were not necessarily alienated from the Jewish community. Some probably did choose to sever the ties and even migrate to new location. Others, however, stayed around and maintained varied ties with Jewish individuals, from personal animosity and curses through daily cooperation, and all the way to intimate relationships in mixed households, mixed couples and households where the actual result of the legal perception that apostasy did not annul existing marriage ties and did not disqualify future weddings between apostates and Jews. The reality of mixed families was permitted also from the Muslim perspective, assuming we're focusing on the conversion to Islam. As long as the new Muslim convert was a male and the as yet Jewish spouse was his wife, surely future conversions of the spouse to Islam was anticipated and encouraged. At the same time, it seems that the Jewish authorities also did not lose hope that the apostate will return to his original identity, and that this might be one of the reasons for maintaining ongoing contacts with apostates on the practical level and maintaining the apostate's Jewish identity on a legal theoretical level. As I said today, I will focus on the very specific aspect of this reality, the possible reconversion to Judaism of the apostate's children. This will enable us to observe the reality described just now of mixed families and ongoing contacts while examining both the case of 4 family members as agents of conversion as well as the agency of second-generation converts. The first case I will present is detailed in a query to Rav Shira Gaon, head of the Pumbedita Academy in Baghdad, in the late 10th century Iraq. Rav Shira was asked what should be done regarding the circumcision of a boy who was born during Sabbath to a Jewish mother and an apostate father. Theoretically, he should be circumcised on the next Shabbat. The circumcision to the Jewish boy is permitted even during the Shabbat, but is it permitted in this case? Putting it in other words, is the boy Jewish? Before we examine this answer, let us briefly note to ourselves that the questioner, the petitioner, as well as the Gaon, do not comment on the basic situation of a mixed family, and no one seems to be amazed that this couple wishes their son to be circumcised by Jews and according to the Jewish religious requirements, that is on the 8th day. The couple's ability to do so also points to a situation of continuing contacts between apostates and Jews. Rav Shira's response is telling, and it's the first item on your handout. He allows the boy to be circumcised by Jews during the Sabbath. Surprisingly, he does not justify his ruling using the matrilineal principle, that is, affirming that the young boy's Jewish identity according to the identity of his mother, and the questioner probably was not content with such an answer in the first place. Instead, Rav Shira writes, and this is a quote that appears in your handout, he should be circumcised on the Sabbath. And the reason is that he is from the seed of Abraham. And it is not the case of old generations of apostates. Only one had had apostatized, and it's possible that he will leave his son in the Jewish religion. And more, his mother is Israelite, and he might follow her. And we cannot hold him as an apostate, so we cannot forbid his circumcision during the Sabbath. In his answer, Rav Shira does not say that the boy is Jewish, though, as we said, he has an easy argument in his favor. But he also says that the boy should not be seen as an apostate or a non-Jew, and he rules that the boy should be circumcised on the Sabbath. It seems then that the apostate's son is between definitions or outside regular definitions. From this unique position, the boy can, in the future, decide himself what is his identity. He may follow his Israelite mother, as Rav Shira says, and of course, he might follow his apostate father. I would like to draw your attention to the reality hinted in Rav Shira's response. A boy to a probably Muslim convert might decide to align himself with his mother's religion rather than his father's, against his father's will and against the law. This is partly true also if the father had converted to Christianity, although in that case the father's continuing relationship with the Jewish woman would also have been forbidden. Similar phrasing can be found in a responsum by Rabbeinu Avraham Maimonides, Moses Maimonides' son, the leader of Egyptian Jewry in the early 13th century. Avraham Maimonides was asked a question regarding the validity, in the eyes of Jewish law, of a marriage between two Jews in a Muslim court. Quite a few of the Jews of Egypt went to Muslim courts in that period, not only to settle economic disputes, but also to regulate their marriages, even without apostasy. So the question was in place. The questioner formulated the question as follows, and this is number 2 on your handout. An apostate, in every matter, married a woman apostate in a Gentile court. Is she considered, in our eyes, a married woman? And if someone has intercourse with her, is he punishable by death from heaven, since he had intercourse with a married woman? And their children, are they kosher or not? Again, as of the query to Rav Shlira, the sender of the query assumes that at least theoretically, a Jewish man can have intercourse with an apostate woman who is married to another Jewish apostate. Of course, as always in such cases, the legal casuistic literature one cannot be sure if this is an actual case brought before the judge or a theoretical legalistic discussion. Nonetheless, even if it was a purely theoretical discussion, it is still noteworthy that one felt the need to discuss such a scenario, and not with his friend, but with the leader of the Egyptian Jewry, who also bothered to answer. What about the answer? Regarding the first part of the query, the legality of the non-Jewish marriage contracts, Avraham Maimonides answers, as expected, that there is no validity in such marriages, and therefore the woman is not considered married. So, if one has intercourse with her, he is not a fornicator in the strict sense of the word. Regarding the second part, the children born to them, who are they, the apostate couple, or the apostate woman, and her possible Jewish lover, I'm inclined towards the second opinion, which continues the line of the first part, the legality of sexual relations with this woman. If this was indeed the intention of the questioner, this might show that the opinion of a family union, the option of a family union consisting of a Jewish man and an apostate reconverted woman and their children was not out of the question. Avraham Maimonides divides his answer to 2. The children born to them are kosher as far as their nasab, their lineage, is concerned. But, he continues, regarding religion, this will be defined according to their observance of it or their abandonment of it. In this answer, even more than Rav Shlira, the language clearly points to what might be called the freedom of choice of the apostate's children. The third and last case is retrieved not from legal literature, but from a personal letter of a father to his daughter, preserved in the Cairo Geniza and published long ago. The different genre gives us more confidence in the assumption that an actual case is revealed here instead of a theoretical discussion. In this specific case, we can even identify the writer, the petitioner, the father. His name is Tuvia ben Moshe, a Karaite scholar from Byzantium, who resided for a period in Jerusalem and probably also in Egypt, knew Arabic well, and gained his fame as one of the first translators of Karaite wisdom into Judeo-Arabic, from Judeo-Arabic into Hebrew. In his personal life, it seems that Tuvia's wife had apostatized, probably converted to Islam, took their girl with her, and moved to Egypt, where she probably also married another man. My reconstruction here differs from the common knowledge of this case, but the details should not concern us now. The basic facts revealed in this present discussion are agreed by all. Tuvia's wife left the Jewish religion, took her daughter with her, and Tuvia is writing the said letter to his daughter sometime after that, when she is already mature and capable of making her own decisions, and this is significant. Tuvia writes to his daughter, "My letter to you, my daughter, from Jerusalem. My heart burns because of you. May God judge between you and the one who wronged you. This is because of your mother's doing. I pray to God that He will not forget her sin. But as for me, I am in perfect condition in all aspects. My clothes do not fit me from all the happiness I'm in. Your maternal aunt and her husband and Abu al-Fadal saw me. I succeeded in your mother's, and your mother failed, praise God. And now, my daughter, I do not know, with whom are you? Are you with the Jews, your father's people, or with your mother and the Gentiles? And I'll tell you this, my daughter. If they are willing to sell you to me, my daughter, I will buy you and rescue you. I intend to leave after the holiday to Byzantium, to my homeland and my family, so let me know in advance what is in your mind, and I shall figure what to do in your matter. As in the previous cases, this letter also points to the general reality of ongoing personal ties and contacts between apostates and their family and community members. This is how Tuvia could send the letter to his daughter in the first place. It also seems that the daughter was, or could easily have been, in touch with her Jewish aunt. And pay attention, her maternal aunt, her apostate mother's sister. Tuvia's letter, with his minute details and emotions, may give life to this schematic cases described by the legal queries discussed earlier. It depicts a sort of mixed family, where although the couple clearly did not live together anymore, they both still contested over the soul of their one daughter. In another letter to one of his colleagues, Tuvia reveals darker feelings when he writes, "And as for the pain of the only daughter, she is always in my heart, day and night. I wish she was dead rather than with her fornicating mother." Tuvia's letter reveals how family members, a parent in this case, might act as an agent of conversion or reconversion of a child in the same way that was hinted in Rav Shlila's response, who wrote that the boy might follow his Israelite mother, or the father might leave his son in the Jewish religion. The fight for the souls of the children of mixed families is but one example of the ways in which the nuclear family functioned as a battlefield between different religions and communities. In this battlefield, the children of mixed couples were in no man's land, or so to speak. I believe it's not a coincidence that in none of the cases mentioned, or others similar to them, is the identity of the children considered stable. None of them is called an apostate, and definitely not a Gentile. But by the same token, none of them is called Jewish, and they are not treated as beyond doubt. They are in the middle ground, or maybe they are the middle ground. For their unique position, they are called to take an action, to make a stand, to define their own religious identity, whom they follow. Will they keep their religion or abandon it? Are they with the Jews or with the Gentiles? The children have a choice, and of course they are encouraged to make the right choice towards Judaism. They are encouraged or expected to take an action exactly when they mature during their adolescent years, when this could be also an act of against one of their parents and towards an independence and self-determination. The children of a rebellious parent who apostatize are invited to rebel against him and return to the fold. Such a rebellion in the case of apostasy from Islam is clearly also a defiant act against the state and the ruling religion. Needless to say, these children are not excommunicated by the Jewish communities of medieval Islam, nor considered sinners, and the door is left open to them. This is why the boy should be circumcised, even during the Sabbath. We cannot hold him as an apostate. We can also wonder, following these quotes, about the supposed triviality of return to a former religion. It is discussed as a matter of fact, and not ritual, and no ritual of return or repentance is hinted at. And this also fits a larger picture from other sources. To conclude, I've tried to discuss the theme of agents of conversion by looking at family relations and conversion, and specifically intergenerational responses to conversion and its outcomes. I have shown how parents functioned as agents for the conversion of the children. The converts tried to take them with them to the new religion, while the other parent with the help of others, tried to keep them within Judaism or to lure them back into Judaism in case of that they already left temporarily, as in the case of Tuvia's daughter. But I hope I have also brought another aspect of agents, that of agency. In the examples I have presented, the converts' children are not only objects of their parents to act upon, they are also subjects, called to take an action, to become active agents and shape their own religious identity at a critical stage in their lives. That's it. That's the paper, and I think we should have finished it, at least for the record. Our second speaker will be Ahuva, Liberles Noiman. Ahuva is currently a PhD candidate at the Department of History of the Jewish People and Contemporary Jewry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She's carrying out a research as a fellow at the Yagur Center for the Study of Conversion and Interreligious Encounters here at BGU, and was a fellow this year at the Rosenzweig Minerva Center. She teaches at the Ben-Gurion College in Jerusalem and held from 2012 until last summer a position as book review editor in Zion, the Israeli Historical Society's Journal for Jewish History. Her MA thesis, written under the instruction of Professor Yagur Yuval, focused on the conceptions of space, traveling, and religious boundaries in the pietistic community in Regensburg during the High Middle Ages, and her dissertation, under the supervision of Yagur Yuval and myself, focuses on the social history of converts in late medieval German lands from 1350 to 1500. Basing on Hebrew halachic sources and sources from the archives in Latin and German, she examines the diversity in the relationship between converts and the former and new society. Ahuva? Yeah, okay. The title of Ahuva's talk will be Family Ties, Children and Conversion in Late Medieval Ashkenaz.
Good afternoon. So actually, this was supposed to be a gig Moshe and I do together. We chose kind of an exercise for ourselves, and we took one question, the question of the children of converts, and tried to explore how this question comes up in our different research projects. So here we go. Every Tisha B'Av, the day that is dedicated in the Jewish tradition to grieving for the destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, Rabbi Israel, son of Ptachia, or as his mother used Rabbi Israel, son of Ptachia, or as his mother used to fondly call him, Ephraim, used to repeat the details of the persecutions that occurred in the city of Vienna in 1421. In great detail, the illustrious Ephraim shared with his students, as later is attested by one of them in the Liket Yoshel, how Ephraim had lost his mother and uncle, Rabbi Aaron Blumlin, both sanctifying the names, after being arrested and tortured along with other highly esteemed members of the Jewish community of Vienna. But Ephraim suffered another loss too, one he spoke of in other occasions. His beloved young cousin was baptized under duress, perhaps during the same persecutions that his father, Rabbi Aaron, suffered from. The issue of child baptism raised quite a few questions in the medieval era. Shlomo Simonson, in his book The Apostolic See and the Jews, devotes a chapter to the origins of the debate concerning baptizing Jewish children. Already in the Fourth Council of Toledo in 633, there is a legal discussion on the issue of the children of converts who returned to Judaism. There, it was determined that these children should be taken from their parents and brought up by good Christians or monasteries. The frightening nightmare of Jewish children taken from their parents or being baptized after the death of the parents is an issue that rose again and again in folk stories, as in the legend of the Jewish Pope who was kidnapped as a child by a Christian servant to be baptized, or as we hear of Herman Yehuda from Cologne in his autobiography, where it is told that Herman attempts to kidnap his half-brother. And I'm sure many of you have more examples of this type. Yet the question must be asked, and indeed it was asked, are Christians allowed to force baptism on Jewish children, even in the sake of saving a young soul before it is corrupted by the Jews? What were the boundaries of natural law, as Aquinas called what I understand as parental medieval rights? Is a Jewish child forced into baptism indeed a Christian? And how is the age of children affected by these issues? Elisheva Karlibach reminds us in her Divided Souls that, and I quote, Thomas Aquinas himself, an oblate since the age of 6, argued that the age of sending a child to a convent was 12 for girls and 14 for boys. Similarly, he argued that children of Jews should not be taken to be baptized without parental consent under this age. End of quote. This concept of connecting between the age of children and limiting conversion attempts is listed in other sources as well, and is followed in papal bulla from Pope Martin V in the 3rd decade of the 15th century. Yet, in late medieval accusations against Jews in Basel, in Vienna, and in Trent, along with the burning of the stake of the parents, the children were taken to be baptized. As in the example before us of Iserlein's young orphan cousin from the Wiener Gesellschaft, I would like to focus on his case, concentrating on one aspect of child baptism. Mainly, was a Jewish child forced into baptism indeed a Christian? When Iserlein had already succeeded his uncle and became one of the most influential rabbinic authorities of Ashkenaz in his time, the rabbis negotiated with some consequences of Iserlein's baptized cousin. In a responsa of Rabbi Yaakov Alevi Mulin, Marim, to a Rabbi Shimon, it is attested that the young convert, son of Rabbi Aaron HaKadosh, had decided to stay Christian, even at the cost of losing his inheritance of 30 golden coins. Perhaps the young apostate was fortunate to receive financial funding from the Duke Albrecht himself. In Marta Kahl's research on what happened to the converts of Wiener Gesellschaft from 1421, she lists 7 Jewish children who were forced into baptism, but later received financial aid from the Duke himself. As Marta Kahl and Evelyn Brugger note, and I quote, "The same man who murdered the parents took away their only child, their property, and their home country, was later the same man who supported the now Christian child financially." End of quote. Interestingly enough, and we will come back to this point at a later note, one of the documents these 2 scholars published on the matter emphasized that the invested money from Albrecht would be received by the young convert only if the young convert stayed Christian when he came of age. On the rabbinic side, Maharil ruled that the inheritance of the converted child should have its final decisions only after he comes of age too. Maharil states that if the child stays Christian after he turns 13, he will lose his rights for inheriting his father. And I quote in Hebrew, שאם הגיע בשנים לכלל מצוות ולא חזר בתשובה, זכו היורשים. If he came to the age of 13 and he didn't repent, then in this case it's an uncle of his mother will get the money. But even so, since the young child was kidnapped at a young age and forced away from Judaism, he is considered by Maharil an Israelite for the rest of his days, whose actions are made as a result of a mistake. At the same time, Rabbi Natan of Eiger deals with a similar case, of another child who was forced to convert during persecution. Rabbi Natan distincts between the period before and after the child comes of age, stating that after the baptized child turns 13, if he does not repent, then we call upon his actions deliberate. When Walter Proctor discusses medieval canon law and the Jews in his book from 1988, he analyzes the differences between two legal systems and two sets of values affected and influential by the different judicial systems, Christian and Jewish. When an issue concerning a convert arises, these two systems intersect. To give just two very obvious examples, a Jew can become a Christian through baptism, while in rabbinic legal system, the apostate is still in many ways a Jew, even if a wrong Jew. Another example is marriage and divorce. Since marriage is sacred, how could Christians support rabbinic and family claims that the apostate should divorce his still Jewish wife? Most interestingly, it seems to me so far, that questions concerning the legal status of baptized children may mirror each other and show a greater common ground, as we have seen here. The ages 13, in some cases 12 or 14, come up in both Jewish and Christian sources from the same period as accounted for. Before the child reaches this age, he is not fully a Christian, as his will is not known yet. His self has not yet been fully revealed. But should we, no, could we, expect to find such a ceremony where these children were asked to affirm their belief and choose their own religion? I have yet to find such a text or such a ceremony discussed by scholars, and I would be happy to hear of one. Although reading the cases I brought before you today, and Moshe's cases, I would probably expect that such a ceremony does exist, or did exist. Last year, almost on the way out of the Regensburg archive, I found such a case. Maybe it means nothing, maybe, and I may be reaching because this is the fun of being at the beginning of a project. Maybe this one case, the ceremony of a girl coming of age and choosing her own religion, had existed in this or in another form, and we might find more evidence as we read, or as I and other people read more archival sources from late medieval German lands, and as people read other sources, maybe even from the Gniza. But today I would like to read with you this one source. Let's see if I can do it. Almost. Oh, okay. So, this is my translation. It's written in German, and I found it in the city book of Regensburg. Judentum. On Friday, March 2nd, 1456, the men of the city council of Regensburg placed the baptized Jew who found his child here on one side. The child was kidnapped 3 years before by two Jews, Piman and Sinden, who were placed by the council on the other side. And in the middle, they placed a young girl who was 13 years of age, or perhaps older, and neither side was allowed to speak on their behalf. And then the treasurer of the city, the highest rank in the city council, said to the child, "It is allowed that you have free will to go with your father or with the Jews, wherever your will is. And to whichever side she turns, that is where her will takes her. And so, the other side cannot harm her in any way on account of her choice." And so, the child chose and went with her father to become a Christian. Can I turn this on again? So that's the text. So it's a summary of Liberles. And I want to say a couple first ideas about this text. I would like to note some issues this text concerns and a few questions it opens. In this case, it is stressed that the daughter is 13 or maybe older, emphasizing that at this age, she could receive the right to decide on her own free will. This Judenkind, this Jewish child, should not be forced into Christianity only because her father chose this path, even if the consequences would be that the daughter would wrongly fall back into the Jewish faith. What was the purpose of this ceremony? Who did it serve? Did the city know that the child would choose her father? And so, maybe this was another public trial, or in the case of Regensburg, maybe the first public trial, of Christians versus Judaism. Or was the option of staying in the Jewish community a real option given by the city of Regensburg in the middle of the 15th century? As it seems from the text and from other cases I have on custody questions concerning baptized fathers from the city. It is noteworthy that the two sides received similar attention in the setting. If you notice, both people are standing on two sides. No one is higher than the other. The girl was fronting neither, and the city was observant. The only representative of the Christian world was the converted father. How did the fact that this was a child orphaned from her mother affect her choice or the consequences of this custody trial? Jessie Sturerwood, in her work on conversion, rebellious youth, and pliant children, states a number of literary examples showing the Jewish assumption that orphan children were lost to Christianity and that parenthood had a leading role convincing children to return to the fold. Indeed, we learn from 12th century Sefer Hasidim and from other responsa literature of actions on behalf of parents who try to convince their baptized children to return to them. And here, in this case, we learn of an opposite case, of a converted father deprived from his child by members of the Jewish community of Regensburg. This brings me to the last point I will raise here. It is emphasized that the girl went to her father, and through her choice in her father, she had chosen her religion. Addressing the question of agency and conversion, we have seen here the violence used on children from both communities to force conversion or to deny one from conversion. We saw how law and judicial systems and the authorities behind them hurt or protected young children. And we have seen that at the end of the day, as in the case I began with Ephraim's young cousin, belonging to a religion is many times belonging to your closest lovers, your father, your mother, close friends and relatives. When they were not there for these children, what was the meaning of belonging anyways? Thank you.
Thank you, Ahuva. Our next speaker is Janina Safran, or as she prefers to be called Nina. Nina is Associate Professor of History at the Pennsylvania State University at University Park. Her research area is El-Andalus and the Maghreb between the 8th and 13th century of the Common Era. She has written on political culture, intercommunal relations, social identity, and Maliki law, among other topics, and has published 2 books. The first is the Second Umayyad Caliphate, the articulation of caliphal legitimacy in Al-Andalus, and defining borders in Al-Andalus, Muslims, Christians, and Jews in Islamic Iberia. And the topic of her discussion today is Agents of Conversion in Al-Andalus, Islamic Ibera.
Thank you. Thank you all. Like everyone else, I'm really happy to be here. So my paper should really be called, What Can I Tell You About Agents of Conversion in Al-Andalus? And you'll see that the three papers on this panel have a lot in common because I too will talk about children, but you'll have to be a little patient until I get there. So, the Muslim conquest of most of the Iberian Peninsula in the early 8th century of the Common Era and the establishment and maintenance of stable rule by the Umayyad dynasty for 2.5 centuries set in motion processes of economic, social, and cultural transformation. As in other regions conquered by Muslims and subject to enduring Muslim rule, Christians and Jews became Muslim. How and when this happened, in broadly historical and demographic terms, is not expressly evident in extant sources. Evidence demonstrates conversion took place. Biographical dictionaries and chronicles identify individual converts and their descendants. Conversion formularies define the legal terms of conversion, and legal texts address questions of legal status, rights, and duties associated with conversion, since conversion involved moving from one legal category to another. Together, the evidence supports the view that conversion took place over centuries and highlights the importance of social networks to individual conversion. Given the sources, what can we say about agents of conversion? How individuals came to conversion, who helped them, and how and what conversion meant to converts and agents remains tantalizingly opaque. Muslim jurists commonly treated conversion as an individual decision made freely by an adult of sound mind. Conversion formularies from the 10th century identify particular formal agents of conversion, such as the judge. These officials presided over a straightforward legal act involving testament of faith, performance of ablution and prayer, and commitment to performance of obligatory Islamic rituals. The act of conversion resulted in a signed and witnessed document. The stories we're interested in, the stories behind the appearance of the convert before the judge, may be inferred for certain types of converts who appear in narrative sources, such as the Christian courtier who converts to maintain or advance his position. In a few instances, particular individuals come partially into view when the conversion is subject to legal consultation and the issuing of legal opinions, or fatwas. The sources also make apparent that not all conversions took place before an officer according to formulaic prescriptions. Taking up the challenge to investigate agents of conversion in Al-Andalus, this paper takes 3 tacks and develops 3 perspectives. The first tack is to present some social, structural, and institutional context for conversion to Islam in Al-Andalus, suggesting that conversion in some ways was systemic. This section of the paper delineates 3 of more possible contexts of conversion: administrative and military service, slavery and clientage, and marriage. The second tack is to look at evidence of individual conversion to Islam and Christianity in Al-Andalus in the 9th and 10th centuries, and the centrality of family relationships. The two types of sources, legal opinions and fatwas by Muslim jurists, and the accounts of the Christian martyrs of Cordoba, speak to the importance of personal bonds in some circumstances of conversion, and in some cases suggest how individuals were subject to family pressure and the exhortations of religious authorities. These sources suggest that, for legal structural reasons, and in the particular social circumstances of Al-Andalus in this period, the religion of children was sometimes subject to particular contestation. The third tack is to consider the radical Christian authors of the martyrologies, Eulogius and Paul Albar, and the texts themselves as agents of conversion, acting to bring individuals to Christianity and also to awaken Christians to actively affirm their beliefs.
The paper thus develops multiple perspectives on conversion, both to Islam and to Christianity, and critically inquires how we manage generic differences in sources to understand conversion historically. In a plural society such as Al-Andalus, where conversion to the religion of the political, military, and social and economic elite was legally accessible and uncomplicated, in a period when mixed marriages and conversion were perhaps increasingly common, we might expect a range of motivations for conversion to Islam. Social structural analysis, admittedly, promotes a functional view of conversion. Individuals, of course, act under a variety of constraints and are compelled by multiple and variable rational purposes and affective impulses. And it struck me that until now, we've mostly been talking about rational purposes and not so much about affective motivations until we started talking about families. The martyrologies provide evidence of families of mixed religion and conversion to Islam and Christianity, and a window into another particular response to Muslim rule: rejection of the accommodations of the church and the normalization of Christian social life under Muslim rule. The stories of the martyrdoms are intentionally polemical. They appeal to emotion, to commemorate the martyrs, and express and call for a kind of internal Christian conversion. All right, so TAC 1, or Part 1, Structuring Conversion. Administrative and military service structured conversion. In Al-Andalus, as elsewhere in the Islamic world in the post-conquest era, non-Muslims served Muslim rulers in a variety of capacities. At some point, the balance shifted toward predominantly Muslim office holding, except perhaps in offices that mediated between communities and in instances of distinctive expertise. Rulers promulgated exclusionary orders in times of intercommunal tension, and this may have occasioned conversion for some. The Emir Muhammad, who ruled in the middle of the 9th century, reportedly expelled Christians from his court and removed them from military pension rolls in response to the church's failure to suppress acts of blasphemy in the public square and the ensuing martyrdoms. According to Eulogius, the emir's pressure on the community prompted large numbers of conversions. Individual men converted for professional reasons under duress, such as this, and to pursue advantage. Chronicles indicate frontier lords were among the first to secure their positions by converting. At court, we have the example of a son of Antonian and Juliana who converted to Islam in order to secure the position of chief secretary to Emir Muhammad. The palace guard enrolled Christians and may have fostered their conversion. An anonymous convert appears in a 10th century fatwa about the religious status of his daughter. Slavery and clientage also structured conversion. Islamic legal discourse on slavery in the 9th and 10th century asserts several principles that conditioned and encouraged conversion of slaves to Islam. In Al-Andalus, as elsewhere, Christians and Jews could not own Muslim slaves, so a slave who converted would have to be sold, perhaps redeemed as an act of piety by a new Muslim owner. A Muslim owner had to respect the religion of his adult Christian and Jewish slaves, but their hopes for manumission and clientage status could be promoted by conversion. If an owner had a child by his non-Muslim slave, the child would be Muslim and manumitted. A Muslim owner was enjoined to introduce any non-Muslim slave children he might acquire without their parents to Islam. The extent of slavery in Al-Andalus is difficult to characterize, as elsewhere rulers acquired Mamluks and concubines who were conventionally converted to Islam and manumitted. Captives taken on the frontier were often ransomed. Marriage structured conversion in a variety of ways. Muslim men could be legally married to Christian and Jewish women, people of the book, and have sexual relations with their Christian and Jewish female slaves. The Maliki legal consensus in this period was that if the father was Muslim, his children by a non-Muslim woman of the book would be Muslim, although jurists considered many circumstances that tested this principle. I'll return to this subject. Here I want to point out that legally, structurally speaking, the marriage of a Muslim man to a non-Muslim produced Muslim children. Also, legal structurally speaking, the children of a man who converted to Islam who were under the age of 7, according to the conversion formularies, would also be Muslim. The father's act of conversion would be the agent of his children's conversion. Arguably, the legal structure of marriage facilitated the occurrence of interreligious marriages and perhaps promoted conversion of individual men and later of their families. Chronicles report instances of elite interreligious marriages, and Islamic legal sources in the martyrologies suggest mixed marriages and families were not uncommon in the 9th and 10th centuries, not just among the elite. The martyrologies provide some distinctive examples not only of Muslim men married to Christian women, but also of Christian men married to Muslim women, such as the parents of the martyr Maria. Tack 2, family relations and conversion. Mixed marriages brought family networks together in ways that facilitated and perhaps promoted conversion. In the modern world, conversion often takes place prior to or following the union of individuals of different faiths, and this may have been true in Al-Andalus. The fact that legal sources are oriented towards legal problems may generate a stronger impression than warranted that many Christian wives did not convert to the religion of their Muslim husbands. Perhaps those who did are not of legal interest. The significance of conversion and intermarriage for the legal status of children was the subject of much juridical writing and contributes to that impression. Agents for conversion thus include husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, but other agents appear as well. Sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, members of extended family of older and younger generations. A 9th century legal opinion, for example, describes a deathbed conversion to Islam of a Christian woman encouraged by her Muslim son-in-law so that she could be buried in a Muslim cemetery, presumably where she would one day be joined by her converted Muslim daughter and Muslim, perhaps converted, son-in-law. Most of the stories of the Christian martyrs that identify agents of conversion indicate conversion to Christianity. Maria's father was a Christian landowner who married a Muslim woman and converted her to Christianity. The conversion must have been an act of evangelism because as a violation of Islamic law, it brooked serious consequences, and the couple uprooted their family to protect themselves from unwanted attention. When the mother died, the father took up a penitential life and sent his son, Walabansus, to study at the monastery of St. Felix, and his daughter to the convent of Cuticlara. The martyrologies present a few examples of secret Christians who hid their true identity and practiced their faith in private were among trusted Christians. Secret Christians were converts to Christianity and converts to Islam who reverted to Christianity, like Felix, who was born to Christian parents, converted to Islam, and then returned to Christianity. The martyrologies identify Wittesundus and Salomon similarly as restored Christians. Some secret Christians perhaps converted to Islam for show, but continued to practice Christianity, and some were individuals who should have been Muslim by Islamic law because of parentage, but practiced Christianity. Sabigotho's widowed Muslim mother married a Muslim who turned out to be a secret Christian, and he converted her and Sabigotho. The implication is that he acted as an evangelist. Sabigotho married Aurelius, who was born to a Muslim father and a Christian mother, but was orphaned at an early age. In his youth, he turned to priests for instruction in Christianity, becoming a secret Christian as well. Felix married Liviosa, another secret Christian. Another Felix from a Muslim family became a monk under circumstances that are not described. Jessica Koop suggests that the martyrs challenged the political and social order, that before the martyrs challenged the political and social order, Muslim authorities and families may have tolerated interreligious marriages and Christian family members, and that perhaps they were particularly unconcerned about the Christianity of female family members. Such social tolerance may have been informed by an informed contemporary legal interpretation and practice, not only in reference to tolerance of mixed marriages and families, but also, more specifically, tolerance for the Christianity of children of Muslim heritage who were orphaned, and for those who were introduced to Christianity by their mothers or relatives in certain circumstances. Maliki legal opinions that served as the basis of Islamic legal interpretation and practice in Al-Andalus in the 9th and 10th centuries defined the legal status of children born to Muslim fathers and Christian mothers as Muslim, but took into account how a child was raised, acknowledging that religious identity is not simply a matter of birth, but also of inculcation. A child must know his or her religion to be accountable to its tenets. A child whose Muslim father died and was raised as a Christian by his or her Christian mother, for example, could not be treated as an apostate if he or she never knew Islam. Jurists opined about related opinions such as the age of religious knowledge and accountability, child custody in mixed families in matters of death and divorce, and the rearing of children. The legal evidence also describes instances of children seeking conversion to Islam, which invites another perspective on agency, as we just heard in another context. 2 10th century fatwas turn on the problem of a young convert to Islam changing his mind. As one fatwa relates, the judge asked the Cordoban jurist Ubaydullah ibn Yahya for counsel about a Christian boy who changed his mind within days of his formal documented conversion. The jurist opines that the boy is not subject to capital punishment for apostasy, assuming he is not of legal age, attained with physical maturity. The other fatwa reports it was written in response to a question posed by the judge about a boy who approached him with an interest in conversion. The judge placed the boy in the care of a Muslim sponsor. The boy's parents met with him frequently while he was under the sponsor's care and persuaded him to return to their faith. The jurist, Ibn Lubaba, opines that the punishment for apostasy does not apply if the boy is not of age. Both Ubaydullah and Ibn Lubaba, in their separate opinions, enjoined the judge to make an effort to persuade the converted boy to remain Muslim, using words and harsher tactics. Both fatwas distinguish between an age of knowing religion, making conversion reasoned, and an age of legal responsibility and accountability for apostasy. The 2 fatwas speak not only of the gap between the age of reason and the age of legal accountability, but also of the importance of religious inculcation for religious identity. Ibn Lubaba's fatwa describes a judge going so far as to find Muslim custodial care for the young convert. Another fatwa addressed to Ibn Zarb in the 10th century poses a question about an 8-year-old Jewish boy who converted to Islam and whether he should be allowed to continue to live with his parents. Ibn Zarb inclines not to take the boy from his parents, probably because of his young age. Ibn Zarb advises that the boy should be examined at puberty to see if he professes Islam, and if he does not, he should be exhorted and beaten, but not killed. Again, we see parallels. How the boys described in the fatwas came to Islam is unknown. What is established is that Muslim authorities recognize the importance of Muslim sponsorship of young converts to Islam. Conversion was thus an extended social process. A few of the accounts of the martyrs' lives suggest Christian evangelism and the importance of sustained inculcation of Christianity in their young subjects. One wonders to what extent the legal and social circumstances I've outlined in this paper made children below the age of legal accountability subjects of proselytism by agents of both religions, but especially by activist Christian relatives. Perhaps not surprisingly, nuns and priests figure as clandestine educators and, like Eulogius himself, as sources of support. Eulogius's account of Flora's martyrdom attests to his awareness and perhaps the subject's awareness of the importance of her age at the time her Muslim father died. He reports Flora's claim before the judge that she had been raised as a Christian since birth by her mother. But her Muslim brother claimed they had both been raised as Muslim and that the Christians had seduced her away from the faith. Albar's account of Lucretia's martyrdom describes the secret conversion of a Muslim girl who was born and raised by Muslim parents. The agent of her conversion was a relative who was a nun, who inculcated in her a developing faith. Lucretia's parents did their best to bring her back to Islam with words and then with stripes, to no avail. She fled home, finding support from Eulogius, who continued to instruct her, and refuge with his sister and members of the community. Hack 3, the Martyrologies. The writings of Eulogius and Albar provide evidence of the importance of family relationships to conversion and report of individuals actively converting Muslims to Christianity and bringing children of mixed families to the faith. Their stories expose the importance of priests and nuns in Christian instruction and of monasteries and convents as places of refuge. The monasteries and convents around Cordoba were small, founded by individuals who sought spiritual retreat from the world. As agents of spiritual renewal and definitive Christian identity, such retreats served indirectly as agents of conversion, inspiring dedicated Christian practice. A number of the martyrs who were not monks and nuns were still associated with the monasteries and shared their asceticism. Kenneth Baxter Wolfe draws attention to the fact that 21 of the Cordoban martyrs of the 850s were monks and nuns, and suggests that the penitential spirit that led the monks and nuns to turn away from the world informed the actions of the martyrs. Aurea, for example, was a nun at Cuta Clara, as was her mother, and witnessed the deaths of 3 men and women associated with her convents. Her father had been a Muslim, and she lived in the convent for 30 years. In the context of the upheaval caused by the martyrdoms and the ruler's injunctions, however, her Muslim relatives in Seville brought her before the judge in Cordoba as an apostate. She formally renounced her Christianity to save herself, but continued to practice Christianity. When her relatives again brought her before the judge, she accepted her death, conforming to the model of the martyrs before her. Eulogius and Albar wrote about the Christians who were executed in Cordoba in the 850s for blasphemy and apostasy, in part with the intention of presenting and defending them as martyrs for future generations, and in response to a contemporary audience of Christians who were angry about the problems they generated for the Christian leadership and the Christian community. They wrote as well to an audience that may have been sympathetic but uncertain or in need of reassurance. Eulogius knew many of the martyrs and wrote as events unfolded. His counseling of would-be martyrs and his memorializing went hand in hand. His Memorial Sanctorum, written episodically between 851 and 856, treats the death of 46 individuals. He wrote his Documentum Martyrial in 851 to provide support for Flora and Maria, and composed his Liber Apologeticus Martyrium in 857 to commemorate the martyrdoms of Rudericus and Solomon. Albar wrote of his friend Eulogius' death and that of Lucretia, the young Christian convert whom Eulogius and his sister helped hide from her family. The martyr stories conform to models of Roman-era martyrologies and depart from them, especially in explicit and venomous attack on Islam. They define the experience of persecution requisite for martyrdom by generalizing from the experience of Christian submission to Muslim rule. The fact that public worship had to be constrained and Christians had to act in ways that honored Muslims or debased themselves meant they were forced to act in denial of the truth of their beliefs. The writers condemned in harsh tones Christians who associated with the regime and accommodated Muslim rule, who were tempted by the attractions of Arabic Islamic culture, who acknowledged Islam as a religion, or who simply accepted the terms of coexistence. Eulogius identifies the martyrs in their commitment to speak the truth to Jesus' disciples. The martyrs are evangelists in their preaching, their willingness to sacrifice their lives, and their commitment to open and public declarations of belief. Thus he cites the following biblical verses in succession in his praise of their actions. Quote, "The Lord said, 'Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned.'" He continues the theme of the martyr's inspiration and example, quote, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Instead, fear the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell." He follows this with more direct allusion to their rejection of secrecy and open declaration of the faith. Quote, "You are the light of the world. A city on the hill cannot be hidden, and people do not light a lamp and hide it under a basket. And, quote, "What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs." Although the martyrologies describe the deaths of innocents, they have an aggressive quality. Eulogius and Alvar describe the martyrs as soldiers in a war between the true religion of Christ and that of the most false prophet. Eulogius essentially equates the martyrs' blasphemy of the prophet Muhammad with the testament of the truth and the preaching, and quote, "the preaching of the gospel of God before the princes and nations of the world." Eulogius describes himself as humble before his task of memorializing saints, and in his humility he elevates both the meaning and material substance of his words. Citing Psalms, he makes himself a vehicle of the divine. "Open your mouth wide and I will fill it," and "The Lord shall give the word to them that preach good tidings with great power." This characterization of the flow of his words suggests ways in which the text assumes a certain agency of conversion. As a form of preaching, the text has an evangelical quality, and it also assumes the quality of a sacred object endowed with salvific power. Eulogius appeals to the saints of his panegyric that they approve and sanctify his work and consecrate it to God. Eulogius trusts that his work's, quote, "moral perfection will purify him of his sins and intercede on his behalf before God." Quote, "This work may spare me one day from the fire." Alvar, writing about the text, refers to its perfume of sanctity, reinforcing identification of the text as sacred object. Perhaps, like the salvaged bones of some of the martyrs, preserved, translated, and honored as relics, it was intended to confer blessing and enhance the spiritual power of the church. Eulogius' own martyrdom in March 859 conferred further significance to his words and the body of his text for those who believed in his vision and ultimately his sanctification. All right, conclusion. Andalusi literary and legal sources of the 9th and 10th centuries and contemporary Latin martyrologies locate acts of conversion in similar contexts: the court, the military, and especially the family. In the Arabic sources, conversion is often characterized in structural and functional terms. An individual becomes Muslim because of the actions of his or her master or parent, or to attain an advantage. The backstories to conversion and their emotional meanings are unrecorded. What brought the young boys to Islam in the fatwas I described is open to speculation. Were they motivated by impulses of adolescent self-determination? Were they pursuing opportunities such as apprenticeship or education? The fact that the parents sought adjudication at the Qadi's court indicates their opposition to the actions of their sons, and Ibn Lubaba's fatwa refers to parents' successful efforts to persuade or pressure their child to return to their Christian faith. From the perspective of jurists, conversion is formally simple but requires rational understanding and inculcation, and bears an obligation of accountability. Maliki jurists acknowledge that the religious status of children before the age of legal accountability depended on the religion of their parents and their upbringing. The martyrology suggests that Christians understood this legal ambiguity and raised children, with Muslim fathers or mothers as Christian out of sight of Muslim relatives and authorities, perhaps relocating to another town or enrolling the children in religious communities. Priests, monks, and nuns counseled and protected young Christians and may even have baptized and instructed young converts like Lucretia. The martyrologies reflect the perspective of a defiant, radical community within the larger Christian community. Beyond recording stories of conversion and secret Christians, Eulogius's martyrologies call readers to the example of the martyrs as the disciples of the Lord and preachers of the word. In his view, they evangelized the nations when they denied the claims and message of Muhammad, and his memorial of the saints itself is a kind of gospel. The acts of the martyrs and the agency of the book speak of a profoundly emotional register of conversion in a context of perhaps common practical conversion and toleration for the practices of mixed families. Thank you.
Okay. Our last speaker is the respondent for this panel, Professor Moshe Rosman. He's a professor of Jewish history in the Kushinsky Department of Jewish History and Contemporary Jewry at Bar-Ilan University. During the current academic year, he's heading a research group on the topic of Jewish women, Jewish women's cultural capital at the Israel Institute of Advanced Studies in Jerusalem. His research specialty is the history of Jews in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and although Moshe did not send this in his bio, I cannot fail and mention two of his books that are my favorite. One is The Founder of Hasidism, which I personally call the Finder of Hasidism, Finder of the Founder of Hasidism, because Moshe actually found the Besh. Yeah. And the other is How Jewish is Jewish History. Moshe Rosman, please.
Good afternoon. As you've heard, I'm an outsider here. I'm not a medievalist. These talks all are in the medieval period, and I've never researched conversion. All of you have been discussing this for 4 years, so I'm sure I'll be saying things that sound outlandish, ignorant, and I hope that you'll bear with me and correct me. I'd like, first of all, to try to put all of these talks in the context of agents of conversion. And what we heard were that there are, if you think of it in the broadest possible way, there are many, many agents of conversion that were covered in these talks. There's social economic conditions, persecution and violence, law, war, a government policy, adolescence can be an agent of conversion, and then there are institutions that are agents of conversion. The institution of martyrdom, the courts, bureaucracy, monasteries, convents, and schools. Slavery, the institution of slavery can be an agent. Texts can be an agent of conversion, and sermons. And then, of course, contact with individual people. Slave masters, friends, proselytizers, missionaries, and especially, as is emphasized in every one of the talks, family members, whether it be parents or siblings, or other family members. Now, you can think of conversion in terms of innovation adoption theory. This I learned from the footnotes in Nina's talk, and which you didn't get to hear. Now, innovation adoption theory talks about 3 stages: exposure, implementation, and then maintenance. Now, so if you think of the conversion process with these 3 stages, one thing that comes clear is there's never one agent of conversion. The agency of conversion is always a cluster of agents which are active at different stages. So, for example, the exposure might come from a sermon, but the implementation is going to come from contact with an individual, and maintenance will come from contact with an institution. Exposure might come from a parent, but then again, or from forced conversion, for that matter. But the real implementation and maintenance will come from contact with some institution or some other individuals. Now, the talks also raise a basic issue, which I'm sure you have discussed many times in the course of your deliberations. And it's connected to Emily's talk this morning and the question that I asked her, and this is why I asked the question, that is conversion of convenience versus conversion of conviction, which is a big issue in conversion. I'm sure many of you know the quip of Professor Daniel Kvolson, the Russian Semitic scholar from the 19th century, who when asked if he converted from Judaism to Russian Orthodoxy out of conviction, he said, yes, I was very convinced that it's much better to be a professor in St. Petersburg than a Melamed in Vinica. But I'd like to frame the question a little bit differently. It's not conviction versus convenience, but rather, what actually are you converting? Or to what are you converting? So I would like to put it in terms of status versus identity. That what we see, we know that all three religions, ideally, in theory, claim that once you change your status, you change your identity. But each one of these talks has shown that in practical terms, representatives of each religion recognize that change of status is not necessarily change of identity. So we saw from Moshe Yagur's talk that you might have a new religious status, but you retain your social identity as a Jew. And Nina's talk also showed various situations where people changed their status but retained their identity. In most of her cases, we're talking about Christians. The whole issue of forced conversion. How can the change of status through forced conversion be considered also a change of identity? We see there's a real tension there that's constant, and then again in every talk shows it's an issue. The Muslim court that considers whether a child actually knows religion. In other words, does it have a Muslim identity? Or the Christian activists who say that, well, you're a Christian by status, but you're really, but you're a collaborationist with the Muslims, and your identity is not truly Christian, and you have to undergo more of a conversion, or a more intensive conversion. Or Abraham, the son of the Rambam, who says, well, the children of these people by status are Jewish. They're not mamzerim, they're not, I can't say bastard, that's not the right.
Illegitimate.
What?
Illegitimate.
No, it's more than that. But okay, we'll leave it at bastard. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that their identity will be Jewish. And the same thing with the case with Shri Gaon. The status of this child is Jewish. Will his identity be Jewish? We don't know. The Christian court that gives the girl the opportunity to decide what is her identity going to be, even though by law, excuse me, she's Christian. So the tension between status and identity is very clear in each of the talks. And also the importance of family. That when it comes to determining identity, it seems that the factor of the agency of family is much more important than some of the other agents that were mentioned. Now, all three papers also touch on the issue of deconversion. That is, going back to your original religion. And here, there are also agents. The community can be an agent. That is, Ahuva didn't actually get into this, but again, in the paper that I read, she mentioned that the Jews who were on one side, in the case that she showed us, were kidnappers who kidnapped a girl when she was 10 years old from her father and tried to bring her back to Judaism. So the community might be an agent of deconversion. And again, from the examples that we heard in the talks, family certainly will be an agent of deconversion, and then professional proselytizers. The sources that we have seem to always talk about deconversion during the implementation and maintenance phases. I wonder if we look for it, if we would find sources that talk about deconversion attempts in the exposure phase, which might be the most interesting. And finally, I would like to know more about quantity, a quantitative perspective in all of these cases. I mean, how many Jews in each of these contexts, or Christians in the context of Andalus, actually did convert, and why is quantity important? So I'll give you an example from something I do know a little bit about. In the first decade of the 19th century, in Berlin, 1/9 of the Jewish community converted. When that's happening, then it would seem that the main agent of conversion is socioeconomic conditions. You don't need much more than that, certainly for the exposure and implementation stages. So to determine the strength of various agencies, it would be very helpful to know what quantities we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before opening the floor for questions, do Nina and Ahuva, if you want to respond maybe to points raised by Moshe? You do.
Okay, so thank you very much, Moshe. And I just want to respond briefly to 2 points you made. I'll start with the latter. You talked about quantities. So I brought here 1 case out of 3 cases of custody problems or custody trials where one of the parents is a Christian and one parent is Jewish. 3 cases in less than 20 years in one city. And the city has about 400 Jews. And these are 3 cases out of 11 from 20 years in this one city that I have a story about, which I guess is, as you said, just a reflection of many cases that we don't have. So I think this is a big issue. You mentioned briefly that the girl stayed by legal status. She should have been a Christian. So that's actually interesting because when I thought I came across this case in Raphael Strauss's book about the Register of Jews from Regensburg. There he only lists 2 sentences about the case. He doesn't cite it, but just like sums it up. And he says that the girl stayed Christian. And I thought, wow, like a girl was allowed to choose between, when she's 13, between Judaism and Christianity, when she's already Christian. It kind of I was stunned by it. And then when I found the document itself, it's not what it says. It says that she became Christian. So even though it's still a radical case, she is, in my view at least, a Jew and not yet a Christian.
I would just affirm that the question of what conversion is, what it means in any of our contexts, is something worth exploring, and I think is manifold, is different, and often different within each case as well.
Okay, so about the question of quantity, look forward to the online website of the Center for the Study of Conversion with our database, where you can actually do some quantitative work. Hopefully we'll be online someday. Okay, so I'm opening the floor for questions. So Avital and Mr. Shore. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
I'm not sure even it's a question. It's more of a comment. I thought that that is everybody hear me? Okay. So while you were talking and Moshe's lecture, I was thinking about these distinctions that Professor Rosman suggested between status and identity, but I think it should be even, there's another category, which I don't know how to call exactly, but which is much more elusive. And I think maybe the answer, maybe we can find it in the ritual itself. And here it also goes, I think it can be useful to compare the ritual of conversion to the ritual of marriage and the way both religions addressing it, because and it's not in vain that a lot of the examples that you've shown are juxtaposing marriages and conversion, because I think there's a transformation there that is not only legal and is not only a question of status, of marital status, but is also something that is, I would call, I don't know, with lack of other better category, I would say a sort of metaphysical transformation that occurs both in marriage and in conversion, that is something that we should take in mind or into consideration when we're looking into these texts, because I think that the legal and the identity gives us just part of the picture, but something happens there. They have a notion that something else is happening there, and I think
transubstantiation.
And the best place that we can see that is in the question of accountability, right? Because when is someone accountable to be to accept marriage, for example, and the question of whether if you were baptized under the age of 12 or 13, are you a Christian or not, is very much, I thought, it's very similar to questions of mi'un, right? When you enforce someone to get married, and she is married, she's legally married, but if she refuses before she gets 13, she can be out of the marriage without even getting divorced, because she has the right to do that. And the question is always whether she was already married or not. So these are very similar questions, and I think if we can juxtapose them together, maybe we can have some, I don't know, some answers to what is conversion.
I think we'll collect a few comments and questions, and then let our panelists answer. So I've got Emily, Paul, and Woz, and jump up.
This is a question for Ahuva. I wanted to invite. No, I'll yell. I want to invite you to expand a little bit on your sources, and in particular to consider the slant of the sources that are reporting these choices. So are Christian sources more likely to report cases where the choice is Christian, and would they really have presented it in the same way if a different choice had been made? And likewise, do we have sources from the other side, and how do they present it? So a case for skepticism.
Paul, okay, sure.
Sorry, I'll forget.
It's okay.
Thanks. So, okay. So about going back to Judaism as a child, actually the case that I brought about the nephew of Ephraim, that's the kind of case that I see. I have to look into it to see if I know of a child that went back to Judaism, but the Hebrew sources are mostly talking about those who do not go back. So it's from both sides. But thank you, and I will actually look hard for one.
Yes.
I guess I have sort of one flabby question for both Ahuva and Nina, and it has to do with identity and memory. Ahuva, you're a young girl. We don't have a name for her, and we don't have a name for her father. We know the names of the two kidnappers. So one part of my question is that typical of the source that you've been working at, that because the kidnappers might have committed a crime, I'm not sure, that their names end up in public records? On the other hand, in Al-Andalus, you're giving us a litany of so-and-so and so-and-so by name, who so-and-so helped convert so-and-so and someone died. So their identities are retained in the martyrology after their deaths, and they become part of a community of memory. And I'm just curious about, are these characteristics merely of the sources that you're working with from your point of view, or are these different types of identity? That's a pretty flabby question, I know.
So in terms of the martyrologies, I think their intent is to preserve the names and the stories of the individuals, and so in its nature it's commemorative.
Hi. So about the names, the answer I am thinking, I thought about this question. The two Jews are known members of the Regensburg community. I have a feeling that the Getaufter Juden is not. That he is someone that came, I'm trying to work with the year 1456 and the fact that he says that his daughter was kidnapped 3 years ago to try to understand where he's coming from. But in 1450, the Duke, who is in charge of the Jews of Regensburg, forced all the Jews in his region to convert, or they had to move to different places. And I'm trying to look if there is a case from 1453 nearby that maybe this girl was taken then, and the father has been looking for her since. Okay. And maybe that's the reason why, and since she went with him and she didn't stay Jewish, so maybe for the record of the city, it's not so important exactly who she is, but more the case. But with this saying, I do have cases, records that don't always mention all the names, so...
might just be a characteristic of record keeping at that time and place.
But then, yeah, but then they would say two Jews.
If someone is taxpayer in Regensburg, he has a name. If he's not a taxpayer...
That's what I tried to say. If it doesn't use names, it just doesn't use names. So, so we have both in this case, so that's why I was looking for the people.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thanks. So, Professor Rosman spoke about conversion out of convenience and out of conviction. I want to change that a little bit, play with it, and ask about the element of emotion as opposed to conviction. It's obvious that there's a tremendous interplay between the emotions that these people who convert feel and the act of conversion. This interplay could be even in the stories that Moshe says when somebody reaches a certain age and has to decide whether they're going with their father or their mother. This is, I mean, this is not a theological moment. This is a very profound emotional moment. And the same will be with regards to a man or a woman who wants to convert simply to get away from a family or to join a certain family, or, I mean, the whole issue of emotions here is tremendously important, perhaps much more important, I would guess much more important than conviction in this game of emotion and conviction. So my question is, do we have any kind of a hint in any of the sources about how to look, or how to merge this issue of emotions and conversion in this situation?
I'll just speak for Moshe briefly. I want to remind you that in Moshe's talk, emotions are highlighted. Emotions are quoted. In other words, the this Karaite Tuvia, the source is, it's emotional all over. Emotions are both detected, and because it's a personal kind of account. So emotions are definitely there. Just speaking for.
No, I'm sure that there, usually they don't appear in the sources, that's an exceptional source, but I'm asking, what can we, once they're there, what can we do with them? And if they're not there, I want to hear that they're not there.
I think something that's interesting is that we often tend to assume that once somebody converts, they've left their community, and these texts and these papers all show that that's not necessarily the case. And so, on the other hand, although you describe the situation of a poor boy having to choose, in fact, the families are still integrated. Until he's an adolescent, he doesn't have to choose, and there's a chance he might choose to become a Jew again. So there's a lot, I think there's a certain accommodation to the reality of conversion that is partly affected by these definitive ties.
I just want to, if I can, the fact that they're together does not necessarily mean that we're talking about harmony. Okay? I mean, I can see a lot of situations where for whatever reasons, economic or other, they're together. And actually the fact that they have to be together is the reason for endless explosions throughout the family life. So I'm not sure that I would take together as an answer for
the emotion.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So medieval people are like modern people, is what you're saying.
Okay.
I guess.
All right, so I've got Jean-Paul, David, Brian, and Nathan.
Yeah, I have a question for Nina, which goes back to the point about quantity that was raised. So it's a bit of a macro question, because I think that you've illuminated the mechanisms why people would convert to Islam. But when you compare what happens in Spain over the centuries to what happens in Egypt or Syria or Iraq, you see a big difference, which is that there seem to be very few Christians left by the 12th, 13th century in the lands of Spanish Islamic Spain. I mean, there seems to be a massive conversion over the centuries.
Or immigration.
So there seems to be a difference. Something, I don't know whether it's because people have fled to the north, those who were Christians, or because of something else, and that's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think partly, perhaps, but I think some people argue that there is a problem of the institutional structure of the church in Al-Andalus, of failing there to maintain itself in a way that would allow the community to endure or even, grow. And I think that maybe this is sort of hinted at in the fact that although there's some edict in consular edict in 839 prohibiting interfaith marriages, they seem to happen. So the church's authority over its own population perhaps was weak, and maybe that had something to do with it.
Okay, thank you. My comment relates to Moshe's paper and Ahuva's paper. We have the common theme to both of those, in both of those papers, is the complicated social picture, including the element of mixed families, which Nina also just reminded us of. The first paper was from the context of the Society of the Cairo Geniza, the Islamic medieval Mediterranean realm. And the second paper was from late medieval Franco-Germany, or Germany specifically. And this pattern of the complicated social picture, this is my comment, is one that also appears in the High Middle Ages in Latin Europe, in Franco-Germany. Jacob Katz discusses it to some extent, and I wrote about it somewhat more fully, and includes both the element of the mixed family, And another theme that came up was the element of people who revert to their previous religion. And I'll just give one example, that there is a tendency in the High Middle Ages in Europe for a person who reverts to move, to relocate. Because, first of all, they'll get in trouble with the Catholic authorities, but I also suggested that perhaps their own community will reject them as well for having converted out in the first place. But I just wanted to bring that as an example of the fact that there's a little bit of historical context that was just missing from this panel. You know, you can't have everything anyway, but which would be the High Middle Ages in Latin Europe.
Brian, and then
yeah, I had it disquiet, but I'm not fully able to articulate it yet. I think Paul called it a flabby question. I think and Jean-Paul said a macro question. I think it's a macro question. So flabby macro. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it aside until it's a little better formulated. Until it's a little better formulated. Perhaps tomorrow.
Okay, I would like to comment on one aspect. That, well, I don't have much to say about Janina's paper because, well, it is a martyrology and this entails all sorts of problems, and I don't want to go into it. But the cases presented by Moshe and Ahuva are very interesting. But there is one thing that we need to take into account, and that is the age of the children. I think this is very important. In one case, Moshe's quotation of this letter of the father to the daughter, it is clear that the daughter is, if not an adult, then at least she is of age to understand what it is all about, or to have a letter addressed to her, to be able to decide one way or another. So we're talking about someone who can give consent or cannot give consent. We're not talking about a baby, okay? Now, in your case, the girl is 13. As far as I know, there is a distinction between children lower than 7 and over 7, even in church attitudes toward the fate of such children, if their parents converted to this. In principle, when the father converted, the child should, by canon law, okay, the child should go with the father. That is the usual thing. But if the child is already old enough to decide by himself or herself, then the situation is different. And I can give you just one example from my own research. At the time of the expulsion from Sicily, there was a famous case where one Jew, his name was Salah, converted to Christianity. No, excuse me, Samuel Salah. Well, it doesn't really matter. He converted to Christianity, but his wife Aziza refused to convert. Now, she was pregnant, but she also had, they both had a child aged 11. Now, the child aged 11 was allowed to go with his mother and leave Sicily with the exiled Jews, which means, in other words, that he remained a Jew. He was not forced to become a Christian or to join Islam. On the other hand, the same woman had to give up her baby when it was going to be born and return it to the father, which is a bit cool, as it seems. And it also hints that she didn't live to go very far. She probably left to southern Italy, and after giving birth, she was supposed to return the child, the baby, to the father. So we have a case where, according to church rulings and canon law and so on, the minor child, the baby, indeed belongs to the converted girl. The child who can give consent or can express an opinion has the choice. And we know that this particular boy that I'm talking about did choose to stay with his mother and stay a Jew. So I think this is a point that should be taken.
Okay, thank you very much for that example. So the first thing I would like to say is that was a wonderful promo for Moshe and I's next lecture in the summer in the Jewish World Congress.
Your next gig.
Our next gig.
I'm also part of that gig.
but we're funded by and sponsored by this Yagur, and there we're going to talk about younger children and not only the age 7 that you also brought up, but other ages, and there's very interesting documentation on both canon and Jewish law. But
work on that.
Of course. And but just for your example, I do want to say that in the 2 cases that Moshe Rosman read and you didn't, both cases were about younger children. The father does not get the younger children, and they go to trial on it. So there is still a difference between places and time, and Regensburg here comes out again as I don't know, a very open-minded couple of years before the changes.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So this is not the flat and macro question, but a much smaller one, and it's linguistic, and it may just suggest my ignorance. But when these cases are happening, say Moshe's cases or Ahuva yours or yours, Nina, what is the thing that is happening referred to? What is the word that is used to refer to what happens or what a person is doing when one is either changing status or identity from being a Christian to being a Muslim to being a Jew to being something else? We call it conversion. And we know by the 16th century in Spain that word is already beginning to be used. But in the earlier period, what is this thing referred to as?
Islamization or Christianization.
Oh, but they would say Christianization.
I Islamized.
Aslam.
I Islamized.
Yeah.
Aslam.
I mean, Moshe's
I
sources.
adopted Islam.
And
In Moshe's sources, the word used, which is also customary in European sources, nishtamed, shmad. In other words, lost to the Jewish faith, which also kind of underscores obliteration, complete obliteration of this person. He is gone to our faith.
Still used.
And still used, yeah, the shumas.
Today for someone who leaves the Jewish faith, only for someone who leaves the Jewish faith.
The word in Hebrew for convert, mumal, is very neutral. It would entail anything, while his mishumad is very derogatory, extremely derogatory.
I mean, getting back to questions.
It's more than apostasy. It's more than apostasy. It's more than apostasy. It's complete obliteration.
Apostasy.
Yeah.
I would say it's more tragic than derogatory. More tragic than derogatory.
Agreed.
When in Islam documents, when somebody becomes a Muslim, a Jew becomes a Muslim, often the term is Pasha.
Pasha, Moshe. Moshe also.
I asked in part because it seems because we use the word conversion as a term of art, whether we're not in some ways underselling the enormity of it. Even at the same time, there may be ways in which we're overselling the enormity of it, because maybe some people just don't feel that strongly. I mean, we have some evidence that I become a Muslim and then later I come back and I become a Christian again, and it's kind of like, for me, if my daughter marries a Republican, yikes. But there are people in the world for whom that might actually be perfectly fine, right? I mean, and so there may be quite a range of of emotions and affective concerns here that is not quite captured by just the word conversion.
Agreed.
Sorry?
I'm not sure whether my question is a question or it's just something very obvious. But I have 2 questions. One which is to Ahuva, which is a small one, and I think is probably pretty obvious. Although you take it for granted that in the case that you found, the father is a convert. Okay, is he called a convert?
Called a baptized Jew.
That I didn't see. Okay, so I get that. I must have missed that. I must have missed that along the way. But coming back to perhaps more to Nina, the question about, we use very different, and today, in fact the whole day we've used a broad variety of sources. Okay, from legal texts to martyrologies to
sermons,
yes, sermons,
footnotes on sermons,
images,
and we've interestingly we've arrived at some interesting. I mean, the discussion has arisen from within these very different kinds of texts we've used, and what came out very clearly in your paper, and I think it perhaps can be applied or thought about in can we use these sources, right, in a way that we've done, I think, not intentionally, but it's come out of the way. Perhaps that's what happens when you construct conferences and you put different people together in sessions, and you have different that everything seems to. Well, I'm being perhaps unfair, yeah, but it seems that we look at all our sources as one sort of thing that we can learn. We can arrive at conclusions from within these sources, whereas the martyrological source, and I'm referring to you just because you were the last person who presented the paper, right? Can we really learn anything from the martyrologies, right, about agents of conversion, right? Well, what can the martyrologies actually tell us? Are what the martyrologies telling us the same as what we learn from within the fatwas, from within the legal documents, from Ahuva's
Geniza letter,
right? Right? And are we not being careful enough with our? It's just something I'm throwing out. Are we being careful enough with our sources and what we're attempting to draw out from within them regarding agents, right? Agency and the agents of conversion? So perhaps not a question for you to answer, but just food for thought.
Well, it's good to end with food for thought. So let's thank our panelists.